The Everything Sequel podcast is brought to you by 2T Fitness and the Vegas Beer Guys.
The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Terminator edition. We're talking Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, your cyborg friend and mine, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello, Tom.
I need a vacation. I need a vacation just from ranking and declaring these movies.
Yeah, I mean,
I need a vacation.
That was not easy. If you go back and listen to it, I think you could hear the fear in my voice of trying to definitively declare where I think these movies stand in relation to each other.
Almost like Ted Cruz filibustering. trying to pretend that, you know, he likes Dr. Zeus and things that normal human beings like.
Like I said, though, these movies are strange because as you're watching them, all you can think of is terrible choices they're making and why these movies are bad. And then when they're done, you think, oh, that wasn't so bad.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah. Well, with one notable exception.
Yeah, 1 to 2 notable exceptions, I agree.
Get out of here.
Your words.
One notable exception.
This is possibly the only time I wished I edited these episodes. Could do a whole thing with you. And Terminator 3.
How dare you? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking today about Terminator 2 Judgment Day, a 1991 film directed, of course,
boy, is it,
by James Cameron. We know James Cameron from Aliens, In the Abyss, True Lies, Titanic, 700 different Avatar movies that haven't come out yet.
I'm with John Oliver on this. Take your time, James. Take your time.
Right? Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Not that this has anything to do with Terminators, but when I saw Avatar, the second Ribisi called what they're looking for unobtainium, I thought, I'm fucking out. I quit. Terrible.
Yeah.
Unobtainium. Jesus.
I mean, he's lost the plot quite literally. No longer, I think, a filmmaker. Certainly not a screenwriter anymore.
Well, we get to talk about that.
He's a technology wielder.
Yeah.
And this is I think this is the beginning of the end for that. But in this moment, you know, a very specific historical moment where you have like the best of practical effects and the best of digital effects, and well, not the best of digital effects, but when digital effects are still exciting and innovative.
Yes.
And we're thinking about it in a lateral way, and we haven't taken it for granted that everything's going to be digital.
Correct.
That this is like a very vibrant movie when it comes to effects. But from this point, you know, I think he took the wrong lesson from this movie, which is like we should put way more effort into creating new technology.
I mean, that's literally why we're waiting on Avatar sequels.
Yeah.
So that
and the lessons of this movie for me were that, you know, sometimes the simplest solution is the best. If there's something that's unobtainable to you technologically, there's a way around it.
There's a way around it.
You don't need to sit and wait until until you can
invent it on a computer.
Right. It's
I got
like,
you know what's my overall note for this entire series? Terminator 2 compared to every other Terminator movie. Use a real helicopter.
yeah, I have some similar notes that it's really interesting because I think the way that cinematic technology has evolved since this movie has sort of stressed the need for a hybrid approach where you take the best of practical, the best of digital, and you kind of make them indistinguishable to the viewer. That's the only way it works now.
Exactly.
That's still the goal, I think. And
it should be. Yeah, that should be the goal right now.
But in 1991, with this movie, we solved it.
Yeah.
Absolutely solved it. Like, there are moments in this movie I do not know what is practical and what is digital.
Mm-hmm.
Except when the movie wants me to know that something's practical because it's a point of pride.
Yes.
Or because it's digital because it's a point of pride. And that's like, we've got the solution, guys. Why can't we replicate
Why
this?
Why can't we keep doing that?
Yeah. And there's moments where there's a lot of effects showmanship, and then there's moments where the effects are really small scale but beautifully done.
Mm-hmm.
And there are moments when there are things they obviously can't do yet, and we don't see them, but they find a cinematic way of showing or telling us. Like, this is what filmmaking should be.
Should be.
Yeah. You work with what you've got. You don't create something so that you can have something to work with.
Right. Unless
you're James Cameron and you've been, you're building a camera for 20 years. I mean, fucking... Well, no, but I'm with John Oliver.
You're on John Oliver's side.
I'm on John Oliver's side. Take all the time you want. If these movies never come out,
I'll be fine.
Culture will not be affected one iota.
Right. Well, let's take care of some business. Terminator 2 Judgment Day, 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, Tom. That's high watermark for the sequels here. Budget $102 million, an opening weekend of $31.7. In the USA, $205.8 million. In the world, $520.8 million. This is impressive considering it's $1991.
Yeah.
In addition, this movie won 4 Academy Awards. All the ones you'd think. Sound editing, effects, makeup.
Right?
What?
It's got to be Arnie Best Actor, right?
I was going to say, yeah. just the awards you would think it would get nominated for, and it won. It's the top I think it's still the top grossing action rated R movie of all time.
Oh, and that's interesting too. It's because I hadn't even considered that it was an R-rated movie. I mean, on the level of, the explicit content, it has to be. But the tone of it is very PG.
Yeah.
In a way that I think is a drawback overall.
I think it makes it more accessible, though.
To who? Idiot children?
Right.
Fuck them. Where's my Terminator?
Well, and that's the other thing. I mentioned the thing about the helicopters. The other thing this movie has is the great work of Stan Winston. When you open up and you see actual Terminators as opposed to digitally created Terminators, it makes a difference.
I'm kind of depressed that it only struck me so late on in watching this movie that the battle between the Schwarzenegger Terminator and the Robert Patrick Terminator was about the battle of practical versus digital.
Mm-hmm.
Like, clearly that's what this it's like. It's just saying we're in this transitional moment where we're moving from one kind of effect to another. And literally on screen, you see the two of them fighting it out.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's like a, you know, like a Robot Wars kind of thing going on, because it's like Stan Winston gets like a scene where he gets to show, this is what I can do with practical,
Right.
and then, you know, James Cameron's going, this is what we can do with computers.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just like the only winner is the viewer, because
Yeah.
you get the because they're both trying hard on different fronts, and it's presented to you in the movie as a competition. It's just beautifully done.
I can't.
I have no problem with the movie on that level at all.
Okay. I mean, should we get into, like, do we want to talk about your problems? Do we want to get into the narrative?
I think we can do that as we go.
All right.
I think they'll reveal themselves as we go.
So, we talked, I think, in our last episode about one of the things I care about in a Terminator movie is how good is the baddie?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start your series with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who looks like the physical embodiment of these, you know, robot exoskeletons underneath.
Yeah.
And now you're going, because he's such a big star, you have to turn him into the good guy.
Yeah, this was very striking upon this viewing to me. I don't think I'd realized before that not only is this post leading man Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's post kindergarten cop Schwarzenegger.
Right.
So this is not about building him into a family friendly image. It's about riffing on that pre-existing image.
Right. Exactly.
The decision to turn him into a sentimental leading man is based on what he's already done in cinema. This movie is not preparing him for that. It's helping the audience negotiate that change that's already taken place in his star persona.
Well, and it's interesting because the thing we were just talking about with James Cameron, take all the time you need, that's the thing about this series. I mean, the first movie's 84, so we're 7 years. We're not doing the usual 3-year wait for, you know, and what he was waiting on was technology. And when he made the Abyss in 89 and he made the water tentacle, he suddenly realized, I now can do what I want to do for that movie.
And he really flaunts that up top in the movie. Like, we see, you know, we see multiple machine men, exploding vehicles, basically a reenactment of the same set piece from the original. Movie,
but now he's saying, look what I can make it look like.
Right, exactly, because, you know, and I've not gone back and watched Terminator. I will when this is done, when we've done this. But I do remember that it's very skillfully done, but lots of basic model shots
and stop motion.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, you know, immediately they're saying, you know, look, like we're upping the ante of we've gone beyond that now.
Well, and when you see the I don't know what they're called, but when you see the
drones,
the drones, the airplanes of the future, and you compare them to what you were seeing in the 1984 version.
Exactly.
You think,
I think that's
wow, we have crossed a bridge.
Clear. And, you know, like we visualize an apocalypse up front, just basically to show us that they can do that. And then later on we have it again as just like on a whim as a dream sequence. So they're playing with a lot of money and resources here that they didn't have before, and they want to put that on screen.
Yeah.
And it's in the frame of this kind of like dystopian story, they're able to do that.
But
kind of reasonably fluidly.
Right. But on top of that, what I find very interesting about this movie, you have this original film with Arnold Schwarzenegger as your baddie. You have to turn him into the good guy. And so now
sequel inversion.
It's an inversion, and now you have a new bad guy.
Yeah.
And what's remarkable to me about this movie is you have the same sense of malevolence from the T-1000 that you had in the T-800 in the first movie. And Robert Patrick gives a fantastic performance.
It is. Yeah. It's interesting because it's interesting to me, like, I was trying to put myself in the place of someone who'd never seen this movie before, having watched it so many times.
Right.
And I was thinking, I was like, okay, so if you only know the first movie, you're going to assume Arnie is still the bad guy. The voiceover, like the Linda Hamilton legacy character voiceover, tells us there's two Terminators. Like, she not only does she catch us up from what happened in the first movie, she gives us the exposition for this movie,
right?
Which is say 2 Terminators are coming. One of them's bad, one of them's good. Okay, and then Cameron leaves this kind of trail of breadcrumbs about which is bad and which is good. And he kind of plays with the viewer for a little while.
Because he turns him into a cop.
Because he turns him into a cop. But also, it's really interesting in the scene with the hillbillies in the bar. And I know they're hillbillies because one of them has hillbilly written on their shirt.
Right.
Cameron leaving nothing to chance when subtlety and nuance is concerned.
Is that one of your problems?
No. I don't mind that. That's fine. Whatever. It's really interesting compared to the equivalent scene in the first movie where he takes on the cyberpunks in the street. In the observatory.
Bill Paxton.
Yeah, Bill Paxton, of course. He never cast the first stone here. He's always reacting to other people's violence.
Right.
And that is an immediate tip-off that he's going to be the hero of this piece. Or that there is a sense now we cannot let Arnie be seen not questioning violence. Like either it has to be defensive or there has to be a dialogue about what kind of a violence is appropriate.
And he, because he leaves a bunch of people alive too.
Exactly. So that kind of tips you off, and then the cop takes you another way. And the fact that he looks more like Kyle Reese than what we know to be a Terminator.
Right.
But it's kind of interesting. But it's interesting how much Arnie is coded as the good guy from the moment
start.
He steps on screen.
Yeah.
And how unnecessarily hard they work to try and put the badass back into him. Like, he appears with flowers and then he steps on the roses. It's like, okay, I get it. In slow motion.
By
the way. But, I mean, that idea of, like, sentimentalization, I mean, it's right there from the beginning. The first thing we see is kids in a playground getting blown up.
Right.
By a nuclear blast. And I'm just like... It's like, okay, so here's your dystopia and we've added kids and mawkishness and melodrama. That's what it says to me. I mean, and that's very deliberate. I don't know why you like it, but it's deliberate.
It's absolutely deliberate. I think it's effective too.
Because our main character is an annoying little brat. Written as an annoying little... Well, I don't know if he's written as an annoying little brat. I don't know if you could write a kid in the early 90s and him not being Kevin from Home Alone. I mean, that's the archetype, isn't it, at that point? It's like just placeholder dialogue, slang Tourette, early 90s slang Tourette's. You just can't... It's fascinating to me that the most famous... one of the most famous lines from this movie, the Hasta La Vista Baby, is like... It's like... comes from the kid saying something that is like so time locked, and yet it's become one of the most timeless pieces of dialogue from these movies.
Sure.
Bizarre.
Well, it's interesting just in speaking in terms of the dialogue that we remember, because we have "I'll be back" from the first movie, and of course, I mean that's Schwarzenegger's catchphrase. So to come up with a second one.
Yeah.
It's kind of impressive. I don't mind saying.
And none of the following films can come up with anything but a variation on I'll be back or come
with me if you want to live. Yeah.
I mean, I as much as I like Dark Fate, I think the worst one is in Dark Fate, but we'll get there. It's just too specific.
I understand. Well, the other thing I notice is because we're just out of the 80s, we're in 91, and the one thing this movie has that for some reason movies of today just can't seem to do is it's efficient in its exposition. In 15 minutes, you know everything that's happening and all the major players and what we're doing.
I think that's also a convention of the series as well. Like, when I think of the Terminator films, I think of exposition on the go.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like, usually in a moving vehicle. Like, I think that's built into the formula almost. I think you're right. I think, you know, the screenplay craft, that is gone. Absolutely agree with you. But there is something about these movies where, you know, they don't want to stop while they tell you something. They want to keep it moving. Yeah. So even when it is like led in exposition, it doesn't feel like it because the pace of the film never drops. Usually,
that's the thing. That's what I noticed on this viewing.
On a bike or in a car as it's moving.
But the pace of this movie, I think, is really good at the beginning. The editing is what we're choosing to see when we see it.
Yeah.
We get
Pepsi logo.
We get the two Terminators. We get the kid. We understand he's a foster child. Then we go to see Sarah Connor, and she's locked up, and now we know why. And we're laying out, you know, the breadcrumbs, or laying out the sort of the patchwork of the mosaic. And what's
more successful about this screenplay in relation to the others, and maybe this is simply because, you know, Cameron is following his own work, but particularly the Sarah Connor storyline feels like a logical extrapolation of where we last left her.
Absolutely.
Like, everything that's happened in between the two movies kind of is plausible in terms of her development. Because she's a very different character from what we last saw, but you buy all of it. Like, it feels like it feels like a serial continuation of where she was.
Absolutely.
I don't think we ever get that luxury again.
No.
And even, you know, that, like, obviously the big sequel inversion is that the villain of the previous movie is now the hero of this movie, and, you know, awkwardly, but I think perfectly well, they build in this idea that he's a robot that can grow humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives both Schwarzenegger as an actor and the character of the Terminator, if you want to think about it in that term, somewhere to go in terms of an arc. And it's a little clunky, but it's okay.
Well, but
contact with humans makes him more human. So okay, fine.
Right.
All right.
I value the attempt at it. I also value.
This is what's missing from this is the director's cut edition that I was missing this time.
Oh, okay.
Is that he actually has, like Data from The Next Generation, an emotion chip in his head.
Oh.
There is a scene in the director's cut which I was waiting for the whole time.
I have not seen that.
John and Sarah go into his head, pull out his CPU, flip a switch, and that makes him open to emotions because Skynet put in an emotion blocker in his head. Exactly like Data in Next Generation.
Okay.
Like, exactly.
Yeah. But what I find interesting within the characterization of the Terminator is there's this conceit that he's becoming the father figure, but he never loses. We never lose the fact that he is a Terminator, that he is a robot. I understand why you cry, but it's something I can't do. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you still have a bit of that cold and impersonal.
A little bit.
Portion of his being not human. I think the balance of it is pretty good.
It's not my favorite aspect of this movie.
Not my favorite, but...
Well, it's not even that interesting way to go, I don't think. I actually think it's done better in other sequels. Weirdly.
Like Dark Fate?
Well, like, yeah, I think that I think they come in too strong with this, and again, it's all tied up with like Arnie can't be the villain. How do we work around that?
Mm-hmm.
And they give you it's like so many ways for you not to see him as a villain. It just feels a little bit
Too much.
inauthentic. Like,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
like almost. I mean, all that stuff about I now know why you cry and what's wrong with your eyes, and it's like an after-school special in those scenes. I don't think they handle that emotional content very well. And I think a lot of that is to do with it being an early 90s movies where they typically goes from emotion to sentimentality very easily. Maybe if the writing was slightly better, maybe if the kid actor is slightly better, maybe if Arnie had that experience that he's clearly showing in some of the later sequels as an actor, maybe it would. But for me, it
doesn't fall that
do
short
much for
for me. It
Okay,
feels
that's fair enough.
written. It makes more sense. This idea of he risked everything to get his mom. His mom says, "You can't do that. What's the matter with you?" He starts welling up. He's asking him why. All of that jives for me. So, well, I tell you what. Let's leave it there for now, and let's take our first
What is
break.
this thing you call crying? That's how it reads to me.
And then we'll come back and see if we can make each other cry some more.
Why do people die?
Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing Terminator 2 Judgment Day, the 1991 film directed by James Cameron. All right, Tom, we've talked about this in other movies. I want to know what you think about, and because we've been talking specifically about Terminator 3, and you came up with the talk to the hand. So tell me about the joke hit rate in this movie, because I can compare this movie to Terminator 3 directly between I promise I will not kill anybody and talk to the hand. And the joke for me that works so much better is I promise I will not kill anybody.
No, I don't generally like the humor in this movie that's associated with Arnie and John. I think it falls flat for me.
Really?
I think there's other aspects of the movie where it works. Dr. Silberman's hilarious.
He's so funny.
At one point, he turns to
model citizen.
It's an in-world camera reaction, but he basically looks into the lens of the film camera and adjusts his tie like Rodney Dangerfield. But yes, I
like the moment where she's saying all you do is create death and destruction. It's like, Mom, we need to be a little more constructive here.
No, it doesn't. I don't actively dislike it. I think they waste far too much time in the movie on it.
Huh.
Their relationship feels like something that is from an early 90s family-friendly movie that kind of, I don't know. I want my Terminator to be a bit more raw, a bit more.
He's the good guy now.
Yeah, but he's still an anti-hero.
You have to allow for that conceit, though.
You do, yeah. You have to allow for that conceit, but again, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be kid plus robot, and like 80s sitcom level stuff. Can do better.
Well, if you say so. The cops are here. How many? All of them, I think. It's a quality joke.
It's just there are just moments where it just leans too much into this idea of a kids movie. Like when we get through like one of the best action sequences in the movie in the Galleria, and we get on, they get onto the freeway, and little John Connor goes, time out, stop the bike. I'm like, oh, take me back to the other movie. I know I'm gonna get a scene of this, like placeholder dialogue.
So, do you not
Slang.
like Edward Furlong in the movie?
I don't know. I don't think I do. I don't think I have a compelling reason to like him.
I'm not in love with him, but I don't dislike him.
There's a lot in this movie that interests me, and this I just feel like this feels underdone. It feels like, let's hit these notes in as generic a way as we can. It's really interesting.
Are these your major problems with the movie? Because you said
I'd say the inability to handle emotion except in a way that's mawkish is an overall note for this movie. I gotta say, like, it's low hanging fruit, but product placement. I mean, holy shit! When we see our first Pepsi logo, which is about, I don't know, minute 3 or something, I said out loud, "That's not the last time we're gonna see one of those." And then there's Pepsi for like 10 minutes. And then he starts to get a little bit coy with it. You just see a glimpse of a Pepsi machine at the side. Like, I see you, Pepsi machine. I see you. But there's moments where it genuinely does compromise what you're, like, the quality of what you're seeing, when they had that incredible Steadicam shot in Miles Dyson's laboratory. And at the end of it, you're like, wait a minute. Did they do all of this just so they would end on that Pepsi logo? Like, I actually do think, like, sometimes it makes me question that. Like, why are the kids in this movie, why don't they consume anything off-brand or logoless?
Yeah.
Why are they eating Subway in the asylum? Like, so it does interfere with my viewing pleasure, but it is low-hanging fruit, and it's just a reflection of movies at the time, and the situation hasn't got any better. That's sure.
Right. I mean, we dealt with that in our first series with Marlboro and KFC and Superman 2.
For some reason, that doesn't bother me as much as it does here. I think because Cameron's sort of like, it's so like, I don't know. It feels like Cameron's incorporated it into his filmmaking, which bothers me more. Like his choice of shots, his choice of style, like, accentuates the product placement in a way that I do find mercenary. But anyway, there's a lot I love about this movie too.
I think of this movie as, I mean, and maybe it has to do with having seen it in the theater, and once you hear another Terminator movie is coming out and being so excited, and to not be let down at all, even a little bit, which is...
Oh, I'm let down. I'm definitely let down.
Well, but you didn't see it when it originally came out.
Like pining, because I'm not what, as you know, I am not one of those people who holds the original in a series to a.
Usually you don't even see it.
Right. I don't put them on a pedestal, but in Terminator 2 there are moments when I'm like, I wish, I want some of my cyberpunk feel back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like this hair metal greaser thing vibe to the movie is not doing it for me in the same way that the original Terminator cyberpunk feel did.
Okay.
Like in terms of like atmosphere, I'm like, hillbillies in a bar, really? Bikers? Do we have to?
Do you have issue with the sort of steel blue look of the whole thing?
I suppose I don't know. Well, I don't know. That doesn't bother me at all.
Okay.
I love. You mentioned the foster parents. I think that's a great.
That's Vasquez.
That's Vasquez, and Cameron, legacy actor.
Yeah.
Clearly, a deliberate plant to make you a kind of fake out to make you think that, she might be a. I know, like a mother, and typically we've talked about this with Piranha 2, like mothers in Cameron movies are held to a higher standard.
Right.
But she's a bad mother. But she becomes a good mother, but only when she's fake Robert Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a great, a great fake out.
Well, and you have one of the great all-time, hey, I know that guy with Xander Berkeley.
Yeah.
I mean, we know
Well,
him,
I know him as
but
George
most
Mason
people
from
just
24.
know him as, hey, I know that guy.
Well, to me, he will always be George Mason from 24.
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, he's a lot of many. He's hey that guy, and I guess there's sort of one of the things I do think they I know it's an R-rated movie, but it's definitely a more family-friendly movie. But they're still able, because the original Terminator is part slasher. It's a sci-fi riff on the slasher movie,
Mm-hmm.
and this is obviously less of a slasher movie, but I still feel the horror in bursts in this movie.
Yeah.
The way that people are hunted down and knifed,
Yeah.
and impaled, especially towards the end of the movie when we look like we're in the boiler room from Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
And Robert Patrick has finger blades. Like Cameron's still able to pull that horror card here and there in a way that's very, very satisfying. And I think the first big one is when the foster parents are killed and Xander Berkeley gets the liquid blade arm through his
Through the
face.
milk carton.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that. And all this, like, all the kind of, it's as you say, like the storytelling craft that comes with not knowing who is the hero and who is the villain. Is in because it all boils down to that Galleria sequence. It's like there's two advancing Terminators. Which one of them is bad and which one of them is good? And
Cameron's going to tell you how confusing it is through his slow motion and the face of Edward Furlong.
Yeah. And then we have a great, probably one of my favorite moments that addresses the changing in the Arnie star persona is when there's a kind of like a moment where paparazzi start to take photos of him.
Yeah.
And but like it's like obviously it's a nod and a wink, but actually becomes important in the storyline.
I also love the moment where Robert
gets the photo that links him to the footage from the
1984 police precinct. Yeah.
So there's a sense in which it's a very solid screenplay. Like he's still
okay. Thank you. I was going to ask you
how to craft a screenplay.
Yes.
I think he's losing the ability to gauge how to do emotion, and a few years later, Titanic also fluffs that. So.
Not for most people.
Not for like human beings, but for cold-hearted robots like me.
Yeah.
As he said, I'm a cyborg.
I do love that moment too when he throws Arnie through the window and there's that
I was just
that
gonna
mannequin.
Say, not only is Arnie now the hero, he's now the vulnerable part of the lead dynamic.
Right.
And I love that because obviously so much is invested in that idea of Arnie as this invincible muscle man.
So let me ask you this though, because there's something that happens within this movie that takes all the other movies to an extreme, in which in the original, you have a man fighting a cyborg, a man and a
Yes.
woman fighting a cyborg together.
Yes.
And you always feel the vulnerability of them just being human.
Mm-hmm.
So the conceit in this movie is that now you have a cyborg versus a cyborg. And so now you can do stuff like throw them into walls and have cement crumble and that sort of thing, which in this movie I think works really well. It's a logical step up from your last movie into a sequel. But I think it's taken to such an extreme in the other sequels that it's almost a liability.
I don't even know if it's I think just it's a structural problem. As why can't we move beyond this idea of the new and the old robot?
Right.
Like, why are we basing each movie around the new and the old robot fighting each other?
Yeah, Genesis.
Like, if we could
Lots of
break
talk
out of
about
that-
obsolete, not obsolete.
Yeah, it's like when we break. It's like we need to break out of that pattern.
Mhm.
That's and we never do. So it's interesting because, as you say, it actually works best here. So everything else is a diminishing return.
Right.
But if we found a way to move beyond that,
Well, they
kind of
tried.
paradigm,
They try
we
to
might-
step up in the other movies by making them move faster, causing more destruction, being able to leap further. But all of that's in CGI and doesn't look very good.
Well, but I don't even think it's a necessarily yes, but obviously the effects are superior here because the philosophy of the effects is superior. But
Right.
I just think in the end it's like come up with another idea.
Mm-hmm.
We've done good bad robot, good old robot, new bad robot enough times that we can do something else.
Yeah.
And
of course, so within the confines of our story, they have this big fight in the mall, and then you have the truck chase. And I got to tell you, that truck chase still leaves me kind of breathless by the end of it.
Yeah.
It's such good
a stunt
filmmaking.
Spectacular.
It's what?
It's a pure stunt spectacular.
Yeah.
And it's actually really well paced as well. Like you think you've got the biggest explosion and then there's an even bigger explosion.
Right.
Like it's really well. It's a really well thought through sequence. Like it's not just about spectacle. It's about the pacing and delivery of the spectacle and how that works filmically.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and again, like what's fascinating here is the showstopper. You think it's like this huge explosion. You're like, okay, that's as good as it's gonna get.
Yeah.
And then the T-100 walks out of the flames. I mean, to me, it's a pure demonstration of like, this is cutting edge CGI.
Right.
I watch it. I can't imagine how that felt in 1991. I watch it now and I think that, I think that is not dated at all.
No, yeah. I still can remember the feeling of that, the end of that sequence.
I think it's because you don't see it coming. I think context is crucial here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because I remember like when and I did a film technology course at college, we talked a lot about how in this period when they were taking chances with new technology that they didn't know was going to work, they would put it in parts of the movie where it didn't affect the plot.
Yeah.
So, the water monster in the abyss was like a scene that, if you didn't see it, it wouldn't change your opinion of the movie.
Right.
And it's kind of the same here, but it's hard to imagine, like, Terminator 2 without that liquid metal moment. But they obviously put it in a part of the movie where, oh, well, you've got a perfectly good action sequence, so this is just the cherry on the cake.
Did they ever, for you, fully explain if he's liquid metal, how can he get in the time displacement machine? Don't you have to have living skin around you? Or is it just that he's faking living skin and that's just enough?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting at some point, Arnie says, he can't imitate complex objects.
Right.
And I like to think that that's a note from Industrial Light and Magic. It's sort of like, you got to put that line in somewhere because there's a bunch of stuff we can't do.
Right.
And I don't want people complaining that he doesn't turn into a rabbit or a whatever, or a giant skyscraper. But it's great. I mean, to me, this is like the sweet spot where you're pushing the limits of what technology can do, but you're not going beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
This is not CGI Governor Tarkin.
No,
right?
yeah, right.
It's like we can do this. We can't do beyond this. Let's put a boundary around.
Well, that's the thing. We're
here,
only going to do what we can do successful.
which is in itself is incredible.
Right.
And yet at the same time, if there's a practical solution to something that works better, they go with it. Like the pie plate bullet wounds, which look fantastic.
Right.
And easily blend into digital. But that's just a fucking pie plate.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And then, once we get into the asylum, I think the masterstroke of this movie and the sign that, sometimes the practical solution, the obvious solution is better than the complicated computer-generated one, is the twins.
Sure.
The twin security guards.
Oh, yeah.
It's like,
I was going to
cast
mention
a
the
bunch of
twins earlier.
twins.
Yeah.
Cast twins! And then you can do what the fuck you want
And
with
then
them.
you can do whatever the
There's two of
fuck
them.
you want. We know them. We've seen them in Good Morning Vietnam. We know they exist. And that actually kind of lends me to, so we get past that set piece. And that's the other thing about this movie, that there are, like any kind of action movie, there are, of course, set pieces, but they're well thought out, they're well planned, they're structured within the narrative.
Absolutely.
And I can't say that about all the other sequels.
No.
But there's also a shift in kind of filmmaking tone, because once we get to the hospital,
Yeah.
and the T-1000 arrives, now we're in kind of suspense mode.
Mm-hmm.
The movie slows down a little bit.
Yeah.
And I really noticed that on this viewing, and I found it very interesting and well crafted.
Very well
Because,
crafted.
like you said, we lend towards the horror.
Yeah.
The part where the people are being stalked.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, speaking of horror, having recently done the Halloween series, I thought that it was an interesting inversion of Halloween 2. Sarah gets out of bed a third of the way into the film, rather than getting into bed for the rest of the film.
Right.
As Laurie Strode does in Halloween 2. It's like, that's a good choice.
Yeah, so much better.
Because up until that point, I'm thinking, oh God, how long is Sarah going to be in this, hospital bed?
Right.
Because she's the action heroine here. But it doesn't make that mistake. And, she arrives she becomes active just at the point you need her to. I think it's just fantastic. And her, her breakout and...
Now we're playing into things from the original. She's gonna see Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're gonna get Come With Me If You Want to Live. We're gonna get we already have the doctor there. So all of those moments of him thinking that she's been lying this whole time, she has a delusion. The great moment where Robert Patrick walks through the prison bars.
Yeah. And I think what really works about this, because you're showcasing a lot of digital effects that could look very cartoonish, but it's surrounded with, and this is I think where the horror comes into it, it's surrounded with so much viscerality.
Yeah.
Like Sarah's cut, and just a few kind of
just touches.
He
can go through the bars, but the gun can't.
I was just gonna say, it's like we're checking in with physical reality.
Yeah.
in a way that apparently CGI-based movies don't do anymore.
Oh, and you and I just visited the Sounds and Cinema podcast, so talking about the simplicity again.
Yeah.
Him moving through the bars.
Yeah.
That's just soup coming out of a can.
Right, and a lot of the changes
For the sound.
a lot of the state changes of the T100 are done purely off screen with sound,
Right.
without any loss.
And the person in charge of the sound who won an Academy Award for his work said, yeah, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on all these special effects. I spent 39 cents getting a can of soup.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But and also, you know, like subtle visual, privileging the subtle, smaller visual effects, like when there's just like one remaining metal blob that reconnects with his foot.
Right.
It's like, it's not showy, but I imagine that took a lot of work to sort of do that. But the fact that it's just so offhand increases the power of it. I think it's like,
right.
We can apply this to more, like, well, not every day. Obviously, a metal blob reconnecting with your foot is not every day, but more incidental moments. That we
Well,
can
and there's
make
so
the
many
effects work
things.
there. It doesn't have to be like, you know, it doesn't have to be blade hands every time.
Right. Yeah. And there's so
Though
much.
there are a lot of those.
There are a lot, but there's, you know, into hooks so that he can get onto the back of the car. I love that they shoot off a piece and, like, you know, the piece of metal that joins the foot, the tink 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 of it.
Yeah.
Still connected to the trunk of the car and him throwing it out. All of that is fantastic. So the thing that I think this movie has going for it more than anything is it's a blend of everybody doing their best.
Right,
And
everyone gets to have their showcase.
Yeah.
Like everyone on the effects
And there's so
team,
many
whether
things you don't even consider. Robert Patrick had to learn how to run at full speed just breathing through his nose so that he could look more menacing.
That's it. I mean, like, that's, you know, going back to, that's like something from a Rocky training montage when you see him take off at high speed. You're like, well, that's not digital.
Yeah.
And yet it looks as unreal as anything digital in the movie.
Exactly. He got so good at it that he would constantly catch up to Edward Furlong on his motorbike.
Of course he did. Little shit.
Yeah.
Just like, I would love a scene where it's just like him smacking the back of a Furlong's head.
Get off.
Yeah, it's. I also love the fact that there was like one area where CGI, you know, hadn't caught up with the other digital effects in the movie was in back projection. It's like you still get that terrible matching back projection blue screen thing effect, which, you know, holds a lot of nostalgia for me, but you're like, nah, okay.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's still 1991.
Well,
like you can go as far as you want with this whole kind of liquid checkerboard thing.
Right, yeah.
I know what that early computer graphic obsession with checkerboards was. Maybe it would just look good. But always coming out of some kind of a checkerboard.
For some reason, some way, somehow. I tell you what, why don't we take another break?
For sure.
And then we'll come back.
Absolutely.
All right. Right after this, everyone.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
We're back! Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we're finishing up with Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Let me ask you this, because you've given a little lip service to how annoying you might find Edward Furlong. But once we escape from that hospital, from Pescadero, and we get into the desert, and then especially after the desert when we go visit Dyson...
Yeah.
There are plenty of stories about Edward Furlong. Like his voice literally drops during the filming of this movie, and he had to go.
Poor guy.
He had to go back and redub some stuff. And there's a point in this movie about halfway through where I can see he's far more comfortable on screen, and he's a better actor.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
Just annoying for you the whole time, then?
No.
Okay.
I'm not particularly annoyed. I think I'm going to blame the period, and I'm going to blame Cameron not putting as much thought and emphasis on how to handle emotion as he does, the elements of the plot. I think that's the big problem here.
He does.
I think you could have written him
I'm not sure I completely agree. I think he does.
I know you don't.
Just enough. I really, because I think Linda Hamilton is amazing.
She's excellent. She is fantastic.
And I think it's
she sells.
I'd have to see what else was nominated that year, but I think this is an Academy worthy.
Yeah, that it's an action movie, and at that point, the Academy wasn't gonna.
Yeah, but we got one for Sigourney Weaver.
That Schwarzenegger was even in.
Mm-hmm.
Just him being in the movie, never mind being nominated.
Right,
is a stretch. Yeah, no, I mean it does a really good job of selling that she's the same character, but she's changed.
Right,
which is what you want from a sequel. The sequel version of a legacy character.
And after the hospital, we have we have the gas station. I do like that joke, holding up the coat, bullet holes. Another good joke, Tom.
Well, it's interesting. Like, it also made me wonder, like, why people place so much emphasis on, like, how much comedy there is in Terminator 3, because there's like a bunch of slapstick and running gags based around. It starts here. It starts with Bad to the Bone playing. Then there's like Naked Gun style cars crashing into him every time he, whenever he's on the road, like two cars crash behind him, like it's fucking Frank Drebin.
I don't think the tone of it is what you're talking about. It's not Naked Gun.
To me, it's preferable that you follow through with that rather than it just being like a background gag, like like I'd rather laugh at it because I know it's done with purpose than, hey, you know what would be really funny? You know how Arnie does comedies now? I think that's what it is. It'll be a lot easier to like him if we see him do something funny. And I don't think by T3, I don't think anyone cares about that sort of thing anymore because he's so established. But I think this movie is still uncomfortable with the idea of like Arnie as a family-friendly leading man, and it works way too hard to try.
I don't know that it's the movie. I think it's the character. So you might be right in the sense of maybe James Cameron isn't leaning into the full funny, but for me, the leaning into an attempt. Maybe I'm wrong. maybe there is an attempt, because I keep saying that I don't think they're trying to be as funny as you think they are. But clearly, tone-wise, they are attempting that in the third movie in ways that, for me, just don't work at all. It works better for me here because he's a Terminator. So he doesn't care what accident's happening behind him.
But then there's this... Well, yeah. I think Arnie as well, his sense of comic deadpan grows throughout his career, and I don't think he's still quite there yet. I think he's uncomfortably caught between two acting styles. And he has some nice badass moments in here when he's shooting the locks off. That kind of thing, and yeah, I think it's more about tone than anything else. It's like what they choose. Like, I like the idea and the direction of he's growing in humanity, but it's too full on too quickly. It's sandwiched in to scenes that feel like after school specials to me.
None of those scenes feel like after school specials to me. They really don't. And
I think they hit this idea of emotional curiosity, and it turns into mawkishness very quickly.
You think so?
Simply be.
It never feels that over sentimental to me. It really doesn't.
Okay. Fair enough.
And one of the things I'll lead to within that, again, because I think it's a great performance moment, because nothing about Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor, where she is now, leads me to believe that she wouldn't shoot Dyson. And yet she doesn't. She makes the choice to stop before Arnold and her son can even get there. And I really love that moment because they're trying to stop her from becoming essentially a Terminator, a person without conscience, without thought. And she stops herself. And it breaks her. It breaks her down completely. And so I love that. Like, that moment really stuck out to me.
It stuck out to me too for different reasons. Because the image of a white woman in a cap holding a black family at gunpoint is not an image that's dated well. Even though it was incredibly progressive at the time to see this affluent middle class African American family, and it's the white woman who's the trash in the room. But no, I agree with you. So it's a movie about,
and this is one of the first times I can remember seeing Joe Morton, and now we have the great Joe Morton. So
it's consistent with the themes of the movie. It's a movie about everyone realizing they can't kill or they'll become the machine,
right? And
even the machine learns that lesson,
right?
Yeah. And do you know anything about the mechanical hand in this sequence? Is it purely practical?
I think so.
It's astounding.
Yeah.
There is no digital effect in this movie that looks better.
Right.
Than that.
Yeah. No. Completely.
Just incredible. And then we get some more voiceover.
So I was going to ask you about that. What do you think of that?
It's very unevenly distributed in the movie.
It's unevenly distributed. Is it bad, though?
It's not making the movie go any faster. Which I think voiceover should intrinsically do.
Yeah, but this is more...
I think it's...
This
again,
is not
it's a
pushing
little
plot
naked gun,
forward.
like
this
a
is,
black highway at night. There's like too much... Like, leaning into the hard-boiled noirness of it a little too much.
So you think it doesn't fit tonally?
I think it's
because I have the same note.
It's better that it happens a few times than once at the beginning or the end, which would be a failure. But it doesn't appear enough times for it to be stylistically justified, and I don't think it does as much for the movie as they think it does. But again, this is what future movies in this series ran with, right? It's this idea of voiceover.
Right.
And certainly it's more like, you would think there was more voiceover in this movie based on the following movies. Like, they've latched onto this idea that these are movies with lots of voiceover, and
Right.
it's really not. It's very patchy here.
Yeah.
Um,
But for me, it works the best in this one compared to any of the others.
yeah. And we also get the first, this is the first time where they sort of try and define, they try and relate the machine threat to gender.
Yes.
It's like the first time that Linda Hamilton says, "Men like you."
Right.
And it's interesting that Dark Fate kind of picks up on that. Again, that trail of breadcrumbs that Cameron doesn't do anything necessarily with. It's kind of something where it's like, oh yeah, clearly he was married to Catherine Bigelow, and she said, you should probably put in a line about how
Right.
she's a woman, he's a man. And Cameron's like, yeah. And didn't, like, that was it. But it does leave a trail of breadcrumbs for, is there a gender component to this idea of, like, scientific genius being more important than morality?
Yeah, but what's interesting to me is, I mean, Joe Morton even has the line of, how could I know? I mean, how could I possibly have known? I don't think that's inherently male.
No.
What he's doing.
No, I'm just saying it opens
even though
up
the
that
movie's
possibility.
making a thing out of it.
And it's done quite clumsily and we never hear about it again.
Right.
Yeah, it's. I mean, also I would also give credit to the screenplay for basically making a plot hole from the first movie a virtue here. Because they're running with the plot hole of, well, what if the remains of the Terminator were found in the factory?
Mm-hmm.
That would change the timeline. And so they've turned that into paradoxical storytelling.
Right.
Where they've made it the basis of this movie is that someone found that, and that's how someone
Well,
found the Terminator hand, and based off, and it's like a paradox.
Right, and that's the
based on
benefit
that.
of having this one
That's
sequel.
a plot hole from the first movie.
Sure.
That's like no one. That's like something that no one thought about, and yet they've made it the basis of the movie, and that's good sequel writing.
Right.
I think.
That's the benefit of having just a single sequel before we get into all the others trying to. I mean, the paradoxical shit is we're round pegs into square holes. Nah, that doesn't make sense. But you know what I mean. Square pegs into a round hole.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me that one of the most satisfying character moments in the movie is completely incidental. Gibbons and Carl in the lab.
Yeah.
It's like, I know their relationship. They maybe have one. Like, I know exactly how Gibbons feels about Carl. I know that he's happy that he ended up gagged in a restroom.
That's great.
It's like sometimes it's like Cameron fluffs the bigger, more existential stuff, but on a basic level of who are these characters? What is their relationship?
Mm-hmm.
The screenplay delivers.
Yeah.
Even in like really
And this is the portion of the movie
with the Dyson family, like you understand their relationship to each other without much screen time spent on that. And that's acting too. And I think that scene in the lab is just, you talk about like, economy of storytelling and just the clarity there of like,
all of it's so good.
Like blowing up the door. Oh, we need breathing masks. We've already got them. It's like it's almost like they anticipate where the narrative could get clunky. And
even the clunkiness of trying to squeeze in "I'll be back." It's a perfect moment for it.
Yeah.
Cameron goes ahead as a filmmaker, and he makes it more important for the audience than it is for the characters by the push in on his face.
Exactly.
But then he immediately cuts
again in Genesis.
Right. Then he immediately cuts to Linda Hamilton, who just is nodding her head yes while she's trying not to inhale the smoke.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
all of that's put together well. The idea of, it's kind of nonsense. The Terminator has now learned a lesson about not taking human life. They're not even firing upon him as he, is wielding this cannon.
0-0 is not. It's again, it's like a shift in the morality of the franchise. We want to have bloodless violence.
Right.
It's that weird period where suddenly Hollywood got strange got very self-censorial, like digitally putting walkie-talkies in where there was guns and that sort of,
right.
Walking back, hand shot first, that kind of stuff. It's like,
right, yeah, exactly.
It's like you can have him grow as a character into an anti-hero and even a hero. You don't need to keep pointing out that he's choosing not to kill people.
Correct.
Like, some of them could have died. There could have been collateral damage, and it wouldn't.
And they would have been. They would have been based on the caliber of weapon he's shooting at them.
Yeah, your movie's severely underestimating how much collateral damage there is.
Right. But still, you have the amazing work of Stan Winston, and you have you have the edge of. There are moments within him being shot in the face where it's a practical effect, and you think, okay, this doesn't look quite as great as we would hope, and then all of a sudden, Schwarzenegger takes out his gun and starts shooting legs, and you think, oh my God, that looks amazing, and you're just dumbfounded by it.
It's almost like a hip-hop battle, because Stan Winston comes out and we see this incredible showcase of the plastic face.
Yeah.
Which looks even better than you remembered it.
Right.
From the first movie. And then we have an action sequence where a bike jumps into a helicopter.
This is my moment of the single best effect I think I've ever seen in a movie. When his liquid form comes into the hospital and you can see the reflection of the pilot.
Yeah. I have that exact note. The detail of the CGI is magnificent for such an early iteration.
It's unbelievable.
We're able to see the reflection of the pilot in the metal. And that's because, and I guarantee you that is because they are thinking about it. It's like when Orson Welles did Magnificent Ambersons, and he filmed a whole off-screen scene just so the reflection in the window would be real.
Right.
To see it for a reflection, he had a whole scene filmed that you'd never see on screen, that you only see in a reflection. But he staged it anyway because it matters.
Right.
Because it's good filmmaking.
Yeah.
That's it. But I thought the bike jumping into that helicopter is like a celebration of all that is James Cameron.
Yes, you're right.
From Piranha 2 to The Abyss.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like, if there's one shot that is more Cameron than any other, it is that one.
Yeah.
And I spent, it was sad actually because, the helicopter chasing the truck, I thought, this is so expertly handled practical effects.
Right.
And the future is that all of this will be done digitally.
And it's criminal how it looks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because that helicopter chasing down the truck and the helicopter crash and the trucks chasing each other, all of it is done with such an expertise.
Yeah.
As a moviegoer in a movie theater, waiting with bated breath for this movie, you want to stand up and cheer, and that doesn't happen a lot in a movie theater. I
also like that they allowed themselves a little bit of Wile E. Coyote here. You know what I mean? There's an Acme-like quality to that liquid nitrogen truck.
Absolutely.
But they allow themselves that, it's like how we've had a bunch of action sequences now. We got to do something a little different. So let's do a bit of Roadrunner.
Right. And why are all the blue collar workers in a James Cameron movie seem to be working at midnight?
That's true. And why are they all why are they always in pairs as well?
Right.
There's a lot of doubling from the twins onwards. There's a lot of doubling in this movie. Maybe that's because it's a sequel. Maybe that's again. I suspect that's probably because it's a good screenplay. It's it's a solid foundation to screenplay. So there's a lot of doubling throughout. So there's two drivers, like the drivers who check in the hero and the driver who checks on the villain.
Right.
And then the chase through the factory, we're in full on slasher territory here.
Yeah.
Which is such a great call, and a little bit of Superman 3 with the good and the bad Terminator,
right,
trying to crush each other in a compactor. Yeah, it's.
But that fight's really great. I mean,
yeah. But Arnie, but again, speaking to the sequel inversion, Arnie gets out of the compactor this time. It's like a reenactment of the original ending, except he gets out because he's now that's when he truly becomes he goes from anti-hero.
But this
to
movie
hero.
in this moment has what the first movie is, which is what are these characters going to do to get out of this?
Yeah,
Arnold's incapacitated,
in kind of the same place.
Yeah, exactly. We think Arnie's dead. How are these two humans going, and then you have this great moment with the shotgun where she has to cock it 8 times with one arm. And that's the big, the big sort of stage moment for her character. And it's just great storytelling in the sense of one more shot would have pushed him over the edge, but click. And the effects of the bullet that goes through his face and his eye closing back up.
Yeah.
And Robert Patrick's wave of his finger. All of this comes together into one fantastic moment.
Yeah. But also, again, that sort of subtext that only struck me here, but you can apply to the entire movie of, this elegiac passing of the age of practical effects.
Yeah.
Like when you see Arnie's broken face, the whirring mechanics of his hand. It's like there's a consciousness in these movies that something digital is coming to destroy this world of like clockwork machines, essentially.
Right.
That the society's based on. And yet Arnie also saves the day, so it's like it's also saying that there's a value.
There's value within
the digital stuff is like it's ephemeral.
Pretty.
It's not substantial. Right. And I thought there was a kind of a xenomorph-like quality to the T-100 as he fell into the lava. I don't know if that was a homage to Aliens, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
And then it gets very Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home for a second when the face-changing meltdown, when he turns it, and I still to this day don't know why he would turn into all the forms he'd been.
No, yeah.
When he melts, but clearly they road tested that effect when they do the time travel face melting in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, because it's Industrial Light and Magic, and it's like, okay, so we tried it out here, and now
we'll
works.
Do it
we
here.
can put it in a real movie that isn't a Star Trek movie. But
that's funny.
The ending, I now know why you cry. It's just pure cheese. It's the robot, the puppet wants humanity. The thumbs up spoils it a little bit for me.
Nah, I mean not enough to bother me.
Yeah, there should be pathos. Him melting himself to me is enough pathos.
I agree with that. Yeah.
It doesn't need that extra cheese on top of it. It could just be the hamburger. We don't need the cheese.
Who doesn't like cheese on their hamburger, Tom?
It's
a
not
terrible
that kind
comparison.
Of cheese. It is. And then the voiceover ending, which sort of tries to. I think that like social commentary and stuff like that's done very badly in this movie. And that final voiceover is the worst culprit of it. Like, it tries to lay out the morality of the movie boldly. It's like when you see those kids fighting each other with like fake guns. And you're like, we get it. Okay, humans are going to destroy themselves. I don't need to see this. So yeah.
But overall, this is a
remarkable.
I mean, this is
a remarkable piece of work with
strong piece
a
of
remarkable
filmmaking.
piece of work with, I think, some flaws. That's all I'm saying. Just
but
because
even
it's a
your,
film that's...
it seems more personal to you. I just don't happen to like this, as opposed to nobody can argue against this.
No, I've heard this criticism.
So,
I've heard the. I think there's enough people who think that it's needlessly mawkish and sentimental, where the original was more hard boiled.
I get what you're saying, but it like the sentimentality of it. That mawkishness is not. It's not overbearing for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's certainly compensated for, more than compensated for, in the big scheme of the movie.
Because so much of the movie is action packed, is just flat out fucking cool, is fun. So yeah,
I think it's just overrated. I don't like this idea that it's better than the original Terminator.
I'll go with you on that.
I think it's flabby in a way that the original isn't.
It just looks better.
Depends what you've. It depends.
But I have a
effects.
real love for stop motion and that kind of thing. So seeing that Terminator walk it in stop motion towards the door in the first one, I fucking love that.
I can't argue that it's a more comprehensive visual style. I don't know if I prefer the style.
Right. Well, what about? Do you have a credit check for us?
Not really. I was just struck by the number of police consultants on the film. It's like definitely got more of an establishment feel to it. This movie.
Interesting.
This movie. I mean, again, maybe part of the reason why I just want to pull back a little bit from full-on praise is because this feels like this movie that's really like in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's part of the system. It's ingrained in the system. And I know all Hollywood movies are, and they're all disguising that they're all disguising that they're not when they are.
See, but to me, this is an example of working really well within the system.
Exploiting it for good, but also, for also not so good.
Not
but
for
mainly
me.
Good. Mainly good.
This is a movie that did not disappoint when I first saw it. And that's how I forever see it, I think, because of that.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one really, really final thing. When I was at college, my friend Pete Faulkner told me, passed on something that had been said to him about Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which is with the plot of the movie is identical in every single way to the 1980s animated short The Snowman. Right down to the main child character in the movie watching his non-human paternal playmate melting at the end of the movie.
Do you mean Frosty?
No, not Frosty. It's a British animated short.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look it up
Raymond
now.
Briggs book called The Snowman. And if you watch, the synopsis is exactly the same, except in one he's a snowman and in one he's a robot.
All right.
Which just again goes, and they're both Pinocchio.
Right.
So it's like it's just basic fairy tale stuff going on with Arnie there.
And the problem with Pinocchio, I was just listening to.
Whoa! There ain't no problem with Pinocchio. Best Disney movie of all time. Carry on.
Well, but Guillermo del Toro, he was talking on Mark Maron's podcast about Pinocchio, and he said, my big problem with Pinocchio is always, why does Pinocchio have to turn into a human? Why can't he be loved for who he is?
That's interesting in terms of this series.
And that was an interesting thought to me. What's that?
That's interesting in terms of this series because I think they eventually figure that out, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I think Grace in Dark Fate
is right.
The embodiment of that feeling of just because I'm, a cyborg doesn't mean I'm
not human.
So why do I need humanity? But this movie is just straight up human is, like more human is better.
Mm-hmm.
It's quaint in its old-fashioned approach to certain metaphysical issues that come straight from the writings of Hans Christian Andersen.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that.
And old-fashioned fables. You get the sense Cameron hasn't thought too hard about it.
Go back and read the Little Mermaid tale. It'll chill you to the bone.
Well, yeah, that's true as well.
All right.
This is lighter fare than that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you have differing thoughts, if you have something to add on the subject of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, you're going to have to let us know. So find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. That's it for Terminator 2. We'll be talking about the movie Tom loves, Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, coming up next. Say goodbye to the good people, Tom.
Chill out, dickwad. I might be saying that again in our next episode. Apropos of nothing. Not even as a quotable.
Perfect. All right, until next time, everyone.